Good morning of those of you in Canada, and good afternoon to those joining from the UK. Sorry for the slight delayed start. We had a bit of a technical issue. I'm David Golding, Head of North American Global Networks for Innovate UK, which is the UK's National Innovation Agency, part of UK Research and Innovation. It's my pleasure to moderate the session today. Canada and the UK have many things in common. One of those things is that we're very good at creating startups, but not so good at getting those companies to grow and scale globally. Today's session brings together a fantastic panel of key people from both sides of the Atlantic to look at what's happening in both countries and the challenges that businesses are facing, particularly the science-based businesses and how they can grow and scale globally. The session will start with a presentation from Irene Graham, Chief Executive for the ScaleUp Institute, and then we'll have short interventions from the other panel members about their own work before we move on to a question and answer session. On the panel today, we have Dave Lisk, Vice President of the Industrial Research Assistance Programme for the National Research Council, Lisa Cashmore, Vice President of Start and Scale at Communitech, Kim Morouney, Managing Director of the Lazaridis Institute for Management of Technology Enterprises, and Lazaridis Professor of Executive Development, Irene Graham, who I've introduced, who's the CEO of the ScaleUp Institute, Maxine Adam, who's Head of Business Growth at Innovate UK, Adam Hale, Chair of the ScaleUp Institute, who's also a Board Advisor for the ScaleUp Group, Associate of Oxford Side Business School, its Creative Destruction Lab, and Chair of the Board of Directors of Arctic Shores. And last but not least is Andy Richards, CBE, who's entrepreneur and investor with a track record in founding and scaling up innovative life science and health tech companies. Enough from me. What I'd like to do now is to introduce Irene Graham, CEO and Board Director of the ScaleUp Institute in the UK. ScaleUp Institute are very much the driving the charge for scale-ups in the UK. And this session is very timely in terms of that the ScaleUp Institute actually published their annual review yesterday. And so what you're about to hear is very much hot off the press. Over to you, Irene.
Thank you very much, David, and everyone, and good afternoon and good morning to all of you listening in. Delightful to be here today. My background has been in finance, and I've had the great opportunity to work with colleagues in Canada, the States, across Asia and Europe in that environment, and also to really spend time collaborating with Canada. And I think this is so important as we look to this session today about that collaboration. We've were involved in, and I personally was involved in setting up the Business Growth Fund and Open Banking, which are two things operating in the UK, which are now also in Canada, BGF Canada, the sister company born in the last 18 months. And also, when we look at the Canadian environment, you have a great pension fund and institutional investment happening. You have some of the most interesting of the pension funds investing even in the UK, ScaleUp Community and the Canadian Pension Plan Investment Board. And we really need to look in the UK about how we unlock our own UK institutional money into UK scale-up. So we are looking to learn a lot from you in that regard. So let's talk about this conundrum of scale-up. We, as David stated, are doing very well on startups. We're third in the world in starting up businesses in the UK, where we are less good at scaling them. We're 13th in the world at scaling up a business, and we want to do better at that and work through how we get better at that. It's also true when we look through and to our European environment that there are many countries, ourselves included in this number, that are driving that startup economy. But very few of those businesses survive, and those that do survive, even fewer, 0.17%, actually achieve scale, growing at 20% or more in turnover and employment. So there is a real issue about how we all work to improve that growth rate, because we know our scale-up companies, as Reid Hoffman says, it's not that starts that will make the biggest difference or opportunity, it is that which scales. And we also know for our economies that these scale-ups are our more productive businesses. There are more innovative businesses. They are across all sectors and geographies of the economy. They are global businesses, and they plan to further grow. Even today in the UK, our scale-up businesses, despite COVID and the challenges we've all faced there, they going into 2021 all plan to grow. In fact, 50% of them plan to scale again, and 1 in 4 to grow beyond 50%. So we know these are the businesses that can take us through this economic recession that we are now in. We also know that when we look at our scale-up environments, we in the UK have an environment of about 5.7 million SMEs who generate 2 trillion to the UK economy. But it's actually 33,800 of those that drive 50% of that overall 2 trillion. So they are adding 33,000 businesses, 1 trillion. That's why when we look at the scale-up economy and we look at the SME economy, we really must look to make sure we're segmenting our SME base, making sure we're delivering to what the startup community within that needs, but particularly looking at what we do for our scale-up community, because they are great drivers and true drivers of growth. And when they scale once, they scale multiple times. We also know that actually we can't just look at that national figure, because across the country, the scale-up growth rate is different. And we need therefore to look at a very local level in terms of the actions that we take, and in terms of how we make sure that every area of the country has a dark green fertile growth rate, not a cold blue growth rate where maybe even we're not growing scale-ups. And that's one of the key issues and areas that we focus on here at the ScaleUp Institute. When we talk to our scale-up leaders, and we've interviewed thousands of them across the last number of years, 5 key significant challenges consistently come back as their issues. One is hiring the right talent into the company, whether at home or from international quarters. The other is getting the right access to markets, whether that be collaborating with corporates and selling into corporates, collaborating with government and selling into government, or going global. They also need to build out that leadership capacity. You're growing fast. How do you build the team around you to facilitate that growth? And then in terms of access to finance, they're particularly concerned about that access to growth capital that enables them to grow at pace. And when we talk about infrastructure, we particularly mean the ability to grow at a local level and be able to expand locally in the area that they first started. So those are really the 5 key challenges. What we've seen in the coming years and in the last years, that whilst talent was the #1 issue and barrier for our scale-ups and still a very big priority, the markets challenge is dialing up in this decade. And the other that is dialing up in 2020 is that access to finance. And that's what you see reflected when you look at the top part of this chart and the most recent data we have from our scale-ups that was done and undertaken as a review in the last couple of months. Now, in terms of what's important and what they value in terms of their scale-up ability and their ability to grow further, they very much value the ability to be part of a peer network, to be able to be among and with their peers as they go through that scale-up journey in their local community, the other businesses that are scaling fast. And Adam will pick that up when he speaks later. We also see that need for access to non-executive directors, to mentors, to people that have been there, seen it, done it before, and can help them to grow. They particularly want to collaborate more with universities and their R&D facilities, and also with corporates and government as anchor clients. And when you look at the public sector, it is undoubted what their key focus is on. How do they get access to the R&D facilities, the work that players like Innovate UK and the National Research Council in Canada can provide to them at their local level? So those are some of the challenges. Those are some of the areas that they want to see better engagement with, and they want to be relationship managed and identified to be fast-tracked through into solutions that are available for them. I talked about the drivers of local growth. We want to understand what makes a local area that actually has good scale-up growth? What do they do that others can learn from to make sure those that lag behind can improve? And in that regard, we have undertaken this year some qualitative and quantitative analysis. On our quantitative analysis, we've looked at 8 really key factors. Is it startup growth that makes a difference? Is it bank debt and traditional debt? Is it transport? Is it survival rates of startups? Actually, we found from looking at all those 8 factors and doing regression analysis that 3 key factors stood out as making the positive impact. That was higher levels to skills and ability to attract really deep talent and skills in a local area. It was clusters and hubs, the ability to convene across sector and a community, a cluster and a hub in an effective way, which I know Andy will talk about when he talks about Babraham and what's happening there. And then it's that increased level of access to equity and growth capital at a local level, not debt, but equity. And for those of you that like to see graphs, you can see the way this pans out in these next slides, which will be shared with you afterwards. When you look at the qualitative aspect of what makes a difference, 3 things were really fed back to us. Knowledge sharing, again, that active network of peers, links between supply chains, active university engagement in terms of how the university works and the business schools work with these companies. And I know Kim will speak of that when she talks about what Lazaridis is doing. And then that local ambition and an active stakeholder engagement and identity. So if that's the landscape, if that's the challenges, what do we think are the policy levers that are needed in a public and private sector environment? Well, firstly, we have to harness the ecosystem. No one actor in the ecosystem can make the difference here. They all have to work together at a local level to really tackle the scale-up challenge. We need to segment what we offer to our SME community and be very focused in that segmentation on what our scale-ups need and how they are actually solutions built for their specific needs. Innovate UK do that very well, and Max will talk about that, I know, when we reflect on what's happening here. We must drive local solutions. We have to be very focused on what happens locally, and that's why we work with Innovate UK and the British Business Bank here on what gets delivered at a local level. And we must join up. What we can't have is siloed environments. We have to see that escalator of support alongside that escalator of finance and make sure we have tailored and accessible solutions. We certainly need to break down the barriers to collaboration. There are many that are faced when trying to work with government or corporates, and that culture needs to shift. We try and look to evidence what's happening in the public sector through our scale-up index in terms of who is buying what from scale-ups. And we also set out, based on what we see as good examples, what we think are good collaboration and procurement protocols. We certainly need to break down barriers to exporting. I think there's huge opportunity for us to collaborate with yourselves in Canada on this in terms of access to customers, in terms of finding the right opportunities, and indeed helping each other's businesses set up in each of our respective countries. We have set out, and we set them out yesterday, a whole new set of recommendations in terms of our 10-point plan, as we call it, for the UK economy in terms of how we address scale-ups and how we meet their needs. We think it's equally applicable to others around the world, and we share this today for you to take away and assess and determine what you can do there in Canada. We know we have to leverage data. The more we can harness data, the more we can pinpoint the businesses early in their growth journey and connect them to the right service at the right time. And we need to certainly leverage what works. And that's one of the things we do in a very focused way here at the Institute. We evaluate what is happening in the local ecosystem, how things are developing, and then look to make sure we put them on the map so that others can learn from them. And that also allows us to be a knowledge exchange in terms of providing insights into what makes a good leadership program or peer-to-peer network, or what happens in a dedicated scale-up trade mission. In terms of that, We have guidance on peer-to-peer networks. We have guidance on leadership programs, and Lazaridis has reflected their learnings in what they do, and we see that as a great program that is developing there in Canada. We look at the power of hubs and how that is developing and how that is deployed at Babraham, and we provide local tools to the local environment to use and use in terms of what they do next. And Babraham Research Campus, as I say, Andy will speak on later, a great example of how a hub and a cluster works effectively for the science community. We plot what's happening around the country, and for our businesses, they obviously want to navigate what works and what makes good sense. So we provide a scale-up navigating service for them, for the services that make the most difference to their needs. We also have to champion scale-ups, create the role models to inspire the next generation. And that's what we do with our scale-up index. It's what we do in terms of looking every year at what's happening in that index. And we were very pleased to announce yesterday that the scale-ups that are breaking through the 10 million barrier in the UK have risen by 37% in 2020. Irrespective of what is occurring in COVID. It also reflects the significance of Innovate UK's role with these businesses. 286 million of Innovate UK funding has leveraged 5.2 billion of private sector funding into these businesses. So the importance of that, the science and public sector and innovation, so critical. You can look at all of this. I went through that very quickly in our annual review that's online. And we hope going forward we'll have great opportunity to collaborate further with Canada in so many ways that we can learn from each other. So I will finish there to hand back to the panel, and we hope you will all join us on our Scale Up mission collectively.
Many thanks, Irene. That's a fantastic presentation. I think really gives a good overview of certainly what's happening in the UK, but some of the challenges faced by scale-ups overall. And it really is a challenging picture, I think, for some companies. Although, you know, I think at the moment with COVID, then you have some companies who are really succeeding very well due to the sector they're in, and some others who are struggling, but very mixed picture. What we're going to do now is, I suppose, move over bit to the sort of the government, both in terms of Dave Lisk and Max Adam. We'll start with Dave. Talk a little about the IRAP program and the work of NRC and how supporting scale up. So Dave, over to you.
Thank you, David, and welcome to everyone on the panel, and welcome to everyone who's listening. A little bit of context: the Government of Canada, in its Innovation and Skills program, is identified startups and scale-ups as the high potential companies for the country. And the goal is to double the number of high growth companies in Canada by 2025. The BDC, so the Business Development Bank of Canada, has also identified that the 1% of the firms, the scale-up firms, generate 12% of GDP and 16% of employment. And because they're adding staff and sales exponentially, they contribute significantly to the economy. IRAP, for those who don't know, we're part of the National Research Council, the largest government research organization in the country. The program is 70 years old. We're delivered via 260 industrial technology advisors who are private sector individuals who are mid and late stage in their career, whether they're technical or business oriented. The program is delivered on a personal basis, face to face. There's not an office in Ottawa. It is distributed. We are distributed in over 110 offices across the country. In terms of scale up, we are supporting firms. Our budget for contributions is about 300 million Canadian per year. We are 25% of that is dedicated to helping firms to scale. We also augment the funding with the experience of our industrial technology advisors, because they have seen many of the problems that our firms that we support are facing, and so they can help remove these barriers. And as Irene so appropriately commented, talent and finance and leadership are key challenges, and our ITAs help firms negotiate and navigate those things. And with that, I'd like to hand it back to David.
Many thanks, Dave, and really appreciating that. And I think 70 years of a program, I think one comment always coming back from businesses is that continuity of programs is vital. And I think you know, the fact that it's been going for that length of time and everyone knows about it, I think is a really valuable. So thank you very much, and we'll no doubt return to the questions later. Moving now from the Canadian government to the UK government. So I'll hand over to my colleague Max Adam from Innovate UK, who heads up all of the business growth activities, including the ScaleUp program at Innovate UK. So over to you, Max.
Hello. I'm absolutely delighted to be part of such an interesting panel. As you heard from Irene, there's a lot going on currently in the UK scale-up landscape, but there's still much to do, loads. We're really proud to be part of UKRI, but we're also clear in Innovate UK that as the UK's innovation agency, we've got a distinct role to play, and that's driving business-led innovation. And our business support offer, therefore, has to really stack up against that, so be credible, relevant, and capable of the impact, some of the impacts that Irene has outlined for us. And so that's my day job, and that's part of our goal, our mission to get more innovative UK businesses to grow and scale. If we can do that globally, we will really start to have an impact on the future UK economy. So no real pressure. We sort of trundle on and do our best. But the COVID-19 crisis and EU exit means that doing one's best is actually not good enough. And that objective of ensuring that more of our innovative businesses go on to scale has never been more important. So to do this, we're focusing down on some distinct areas. So we're looking at things now much more about the level of the firm. So we're taking a strategic shift, really, it should be said, to focus on the growth and scale potential of innovative companies. So not just the projects that they're involved in, but the actual businesses. And moving from really the provision of just funding mechanisms with various soft landings, which arguably we've been fairly successful at historically, to wrapping the right support around that funding. So with the aim of a better return for the public purse, you know, we're a government funded agency after all. So, and offering though fast track responsive growth and scale support. And we're very much led by the insight, the data, the understanding that comes from the ScaleUp Institute that we work really closely with, and in close partnership, in fact. And that role, that relationship is very important in the last but not least, our part in playing how building an effective ecosystem for UK business innovation. So make sure that we're building relevant connectivity, so working side by side with that investor community. It's about the sum of the parts. We can no longer work in our discrete little silos. We've got to actually come together much more impactfully and leverage our not inconsiderable public resources. So doing more of all of that and doing it better, you can see is that we're really focused on that mission. Critically, from my point of view, back to that day job, is doing more than just provide the money. It's got to be much more. So the how in that respect is really key. So whilst external forces, as Irene outlined, as COVID-19 will affect literally most businesses, how they are affected, though, depends very much on the firm. So it's back to that thinking about the level of the firm. So where is it that we, as the UK's innovation agency, can add most value? The COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated for me emphatically the R&D-led companies have special needs. So forgive the phrase, but it actually works for me. So, and where they are, therefore, in their growth life cycle should shape our response. We can't sort of just roll out these sausage machines of support. Segmentation, as Irene outlined, is absolutely key. The big challenge, though, I think the big question that's emerged, certainly in recent months, is, and it's something that's always been there, but I believe we just haven't acknowledged it enough. It's how we can transform more of our excellent scientists and innovators into business leaders. It's them that are going to drive the scale-up agenda. So not teaching them to fish. They're good fishermen, you know, they're great technologists, they're great scientists. We've got to help them to become great and really effective CEOs. So our particular growth and scale offer really drills down on life cycle growth stage personas. So that includes scale up, of course. And it's focused very much on ensuring that we're delivering the right support to these companies and recognizing the different needs that they have at these different growth stages. For the past 5 years, we've been building capability through the Enterprise Europe Network. It's the whole sort of market access thing, the global competitiveness question is writ large for us. Enterprise Europe Network has vast scope and reach across 65 countries. It's more outside the EU than in, quite pertinent when you consider that we are rolling towards EU exit in the UK. It now includes Canada, actually. But what it does for Innovate UK is to provide regional to national to international services and connections. Absolutely critical. We've been developing that capability, seeing that effort to work with fewer companies, but intensively, and increasing the focus on the resources that we have, how we can aggregate those resources to support scale-up provision for our amazing innovators. We have a duty of care. We're working with the sexiest, most interesting, most growth potential companies in the UK. So it is about doing our best for them. The UK consortium of 20 partners is the largest in that Enterprise Europe Network, about 370 plus heads, with now 260 and growing innovation and growth specialists. So I was actually, can I say, Dave, we're not, 70 years is a hard act to follow, but that's what we're striving for, because I agree with David, it's that continuity of that expertise that we have and how we bring it to the companies that's the important thing. And plus we've got 18 actual specialist scale-up directors. And on that last point, our specific scale-up program, because I would argue that all of our efforts now, thanks to our work with the ScaleUp Institute, is actually directed at the scale-up agenda. Our specific offer is relatively under the radar in the UK, but that's quite deliberate. It's a highly selective offer because it's quite a novel model that operates via a scale-up board. We've got 18 scale-up directors, and they bring their collective experience, skills, connections on behalf of the client. And we're currently looking at how we can further expand that, working closely with the ScaleUp Institute. So, and we want to learn from the rest of the panel today. Thank you. I think I've gone over my time.
You haven't.
The way.
Yeah, thanks so much, Max. And I think it really brings into view I think all of the work that's happening through the program. So thanks very much for that. I suppose the value of doing these things virtually is that we can now dispense with a 5-hour, 6-hour flight and go back to Canada. And an organisation which I've had the pleasure of visiting a few times, which is great. And so really to hand over to Lisa now, Cashmore from Communitech, which I have to say is a fantastic organisation. So thanks, Lisa. Over to you.
Thank you so much, David. It's my pleasure to be here today. So to give you a quick overview of Communitech, really we are a community of tech organization. We were started in 1997 by a group of entrepreneurs who came together to help one another build successful companies to ensure the future prosperity of Canada. And that's been our focus since then. So they created this organization to support the entire community of tech. It gave us a mission to start, grow, and to help companies with their start, grow, and succeed. So everything from ideation stage companies all the way through to large corporates. We're still doing it. That's still our mission since day one. We continue pushing forward with services like coaching and advisory services for new entrepreneurs, offering training and skills development programs for people working in tech-driven companies and focused in everything from sales, marketing, and user experience and data analytics. We work to help companies make meaningful connections to talent, investors, customers, and partners through our network around the world. And we advocate for public policy and a business environment that supports the rapid growth and success of technology and tech-driven firms in Canada. And of course, we're working continually to build a strong brand for Waterloo Region and for Canada. And although we're headquartered in Waterloo Region, our goal really is to help create and grow companies that create jobs and prosperity for Canada. Some interesting facts: on average, our members raise 19% more capital, 28.6 million compared to 24 million. They raise more rounds, 3.4 compared to 2.5. They've raised more in their most recent rounds, up to 9% higher, so 17 million compared to 15.9 million. They hold more patents, 13.1 compared to 8.5, and have increased their financial velocity, have an increased financial velocity of 3.0 compared to 2.2. So companies, this is sort of a representation of our companies that have been founded since 2010 or later. But I think those are some pretty interesting stats that demonstrate the benefit of engaging with Communitech or organizations like ours. I do want to take advantage of not being the first speaker and touch on some of the other points that my previous counterparts have today. Irene mentioned that the challenge of talent is the #1 issue for our companies, and I would agree that that is definitely a key issue. How we address that at Communitech are in 2 ways. One, through recruiting opportunities, so helping our companies locate specific talent, as well as on the other side, training and upskilling their existing talent through our academy programming, which is really very specific training to help build the skills that our scale-ups in the ecosystem are looking to expand upon. The other way we're helping them both with talent and with global expansion, which of course is always another key area of concern for scale-ups, is through our Outpost program. And I'm going to give you a bit of an inside scoop because this hasn't been formally announced yet. So for all of you hundreds of people watching, this is like top secret right now. But our Outpost program, which is like the primary objective of helping all Canadian companies enter and foster strong foreign export markets. So really our pilot of this program Outpost, which is essentially a tool for recruiting foreign talent and helping to place that talent, like keep that talent in that foreign market. Our pilot took us to the US and the UK, where we've successfully helped companies from Waterloo, Toronto, and Ottawa plant their flags in London, Denver, Boston, and Alaska. But we talked to a number of companies and they really wanted to think bigger than that. And so the part that's a secret here is that this week we will officially announce that Communitech Outpost is global, with the ability to help simplify global expansion for Canadian companies in over 160 countries. So that service will keep things simple, provide an in-country entry to hire employees, take on the heavy administration of payroll, tax, and remittance, and social contributions and benefits. So look to see that Outpost program expanding all around the world, but it did launch first in the UK. So there's that great connection for today. I guess, again, one other thing to mention is Irene did talk about peer networks, and that's something we've been working on for a very long time. It's really the core of how we started. We have over 40 peer network groups at Communitech. I myself work with Ian Klugman, our CEO, to host 3 CEO peer groups. They happen every week, and that's really a key driver for the insights we have into our company needs, and then how we drive the programs that we're building to support those companies. So I look forward to lots more discussion as we move into the Q&A portion. Thank you so much.
Great, many thanks, Lisa. And I suspect none of you joining today expected to get an exclusive scoop. So there you go. And I'm still wondering how a company plants a flag in Alaska, because I suspect it's probably a little bit frozen. But thanks ever so much for that discussion. It was great, and no doubt, as you say, plenty of questions later. So last time we moved from the UK to Canada, and now we're moving literally along the street, I think. So it was staying in Waterloo, and great pleasure to introduce Kim Morouney from the Lazaridis Institute. And so, Kim, grateful if you tell us a bit more about Lazaridis Institute. I think you're on mute, Kim.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Yes, I am. This is one of my, I look like I've been unmuted, have I?
Yeah, you have.
Okay, good. All right, I'll try that again. Thank you, David. It is, it's such a pleasure to be part of this panel. When we were designing the Lazaridis Institute, we learned everything we could from UK ScaleUp. So it's not a surprise. I think you'll see that we share a lot of the same DNA. And of course, Lisa and NRC are just down the street. So the Lazaridis Institute was funded by Mike Lazaridis, one of the founders of BlackBerry, and we were begun to address the challenge that has already been introduced and with which we're all unfortunately familiar, and that is that while Canada has a vibrant ecosystem for tech startups, we have relatively few tech companies that are competitive at a global level. And so with our ScaleUp program, we decided to address this fact directly, in a sense, by working with later stage scale-ups who have already begun to grow rapidly and who show the greatest potential to be category leaders. So most of the companies that we work with are between 2 million and this year, this COVID year, surprisingly up to 30 million in revenue. Our program is national and it's a year long. We work with the CEO and his or her executive team, but we only work with a small group of companies at a time, 10, and again, oddly enough, this year, 13 or so, because we are highly customized. We carefully match the executives in our program with mentors who have played key roles in globally successful companies like Apple, Google, LinkedIn, Shopify, and many others. Our mentor pool is heavily weighted toward Silicon Valley and New York. We began by working with expat Canadians and then grew our mentor network from there. We do pay our mentors, but we don't charge our companies and we don't take equity, and which has caused several people to ask, how do you make that work? And it works really well. It just may not work for a very long time. And honestly, it's a bit of an experiment. Fortunately, so far, a successful one. The ScaleUp program, we are very small, we're very lean. In total, over the last 4 years, we've invested $10 million Canadian in 50 companies. And in those 4 years, 18 of the companies have raised over $650 million. So it is a very good return. In a nutshell, what we are doing is training founders and executives how to transition their businesses from a founder-led organization to a company built on scalable and repeatable processes. I do want to emphasize that in addition to helping our companies scale, we see ourselves seeding the Canadian tech ecosystem with our graduates. As these men and women successfully grow their own companies, they can go on to found, to fund, and to mentor other Canadian companies. And we've seen this happen just in the short time that we've been operating, with founders beginning new businesses, mentoring, and with their investing in other companies. So we believe that in helping the most promising companies to succeed, that this is a direct and efficient way to build what we think of as a critical mass in the tech ecosystem. And in the way, I think really this is similar to Irene's point about needing the skills, access, the clusters, and the equity. I haven't talked much, I have not talked at all about the research we do, our efforts to translate the lessons of scale to the leaders of traditional companies in traditional industries. And we're actually working on a pilot with IRAP too. But we think that by building the critical mass, this is the best way to ensure that companies don't have to leave Canada in order to scale.
Great, many thanks, Kim. And it's really interesting to hear about the work of Lazaridis, and yeah, fantastic organisation, and say a lean but very productive, I would say. So many thanks for your talk. So we are going to head back across the Atlantic now and take a bit more of an industry view, an investor view of things. So great pleasure to introduce Adam Hale, who's chair of the ScaleUp Institute, but also involved in a range of different programs, programs, including Creative Destruction Lab. So again, another link to Canada there. So Adam, over to you.
Thank you, David. I've loved coming to Canada over the years. Back in the 90s, people used to say I looked like Wayne Gretzky. But anyway, I used to have people running to me across airports and asking for my autograph, which was, trust me, very, very bizarre. I'm not the great one, that's for sure. But I would just want to pick up a couple of these areas. I think they're really interesting, and they're both people related. And the first one is about peer-to-peer networks and the impact that they can have for scale-ups in helping them succeed. And so that's something that we at the ScaleUp Institute are also working with Innovate UK and some other parties on, in really building those peer-to-peer networks across the whole of the UK. And it's really interesting to hear about the community of tech and other things that you're doing in Canada. I think we can learn a lot from that. I mean, I've been a ScaleUp CEO, and it's actually remarkably lonely much of the time. There are lots of things you can't talk to your board about, you can't talk to your team about, that you actually want to collaborate with your peers and just kind of share experiences and just help each other, but also inspire each other and give each other that shared ambition to go on and create a market leader that does become something really spectacular. And we're starting to think about it as a community of success across the UK. And I have to say, in Canada, you've got one great thing that has happened in Canada, which the UK has never done. And that's create a technology business that's worth more than $100 billion. That's never happened in the UK. And Shopify now is worth well over $100 billion because we've got 8,000 people, still HQ'd in Ottawa, HQ'd in quoted on the NYIC, but anyway, I'll gloss over that. But it really a world-class business that I think, there must be incredible amounts that could be used to inspire and collaborate and create other businesses from. And that's very much what we're doing in the UK around our market leaders in Cambridge, London, Oxford, Glasgow, all kinds of different places. Because this is, to Max's point, very much more than money. This is about helping the leadership and the CEOs and their leadership teams to create great businesses and to carry on doing that. So peer-to-peer, we think, is hugely important. Secondly, Irene made a point about skills and the density of skills really making things valuable. We've looked at computing education in secondary education in the UK. Computer science is called different things in different places for two reasons. One is because if you look at the visible scale-ups in the UK, about 20% are tech firms, but all of the scale-ups are looking to invest more in AI, big data, making their operations more digital and more effective. And those are skills that are needed across the board, whether you're in hairdressing or whether you're in big data. But interestingly now, in secondary education, computing is the number 18th most popular A-level. Okay, number 18th. 6 times more people study economics and business studies as study computing. Now, those are both great subjects, but we know that, if we can really push computing up that skills chart, that will make a big difference in terms of the skills and the capability. Honestly, it will also really help the gender mix. We've got a major issue, particularly in the tech industry. It is just too male dominated, and I can say that. 19% of the people that work in the tech industry are female. That's just not okay. And part of the reason is that we're failing to engage those young women in their secondary education. I'd love to hear what the situation is in Canada, but we are determined to fix that over the next few years. So just 2 of the things we're working on, but those are just 2 of the things that we're looking at: the P2P networks and the skills, particularly the technical skills.
Great. Many thanks, Adam. And I think you have some very pertinent points there that no doubt we'll pick up in the discussions as we go forward. So many thanks for that. Irene mentioned the Babraham Institute earlier, and certainly the cluster around Cambridge. And I think there's probably a lot of similarities in some ways between Waterloo and Cambridge. So we're going to turn now to Andy Richards, who's an entrepreneur and investor, very much involved in the Cambridge scene, and particularly around Babraham. So Andy, over to you.
David, thanks. Great to be here. And as David and Irene said, I'd just like to talk to you a little bit about really a specific experiment in ScaleUp that took place that we adopted in Cambridge. And Cambridge, of course, has a fantastic scientific heritage. Not only does it have a scientific heritage, it has a innovative and entrepreneurial community, which certainly in the life science and biotech area has been hugely successful in being at the forefront of innovations that have changed the world in many aspects. But the challenge from a scale-up perspective is that so often those companies have been sold early and changed ownership early, and whilst their innovations have lived on, they haven't created the sustained UK headquartered global companies that actually the innovation probably warranted. And really, it was looking at that sort of some of that trajectory and scale-up issues that resulted in an experiment started in 2011 in clusters and hubs, and that was at the Babraham Research Campus. Babraham Research Campus. The Babraham site's a lovely site with an a beautiful old house, and has had a long-standing world-leading research institute on that site, and had sort of grown itself a set of small startups on that site. But back in I said 2011, with £44 million of government pump priming money, which principally went on infrastructure. But that wasn't the point. We were trying not to build a science park. We were very, very deliberately trying to build something that was much more concentrated, much more networked, and proactively, whilst much of the money went on infrastructure, much of the thinking went on proactively creating a community of success, as Anne described it a minute ago, and really trying to grow a community that went all the way from research to startup to scale up, although actually things rarely go in that linear manner. And it's the interplay of those and the non-linear interactions which are actually quite important. And that is really key. And it was then using that cluster and network mentality to bring in investors and to bring in and retain talent, and to try and do things better, faster, more successfully, more resiliently, and more sustainably. And that's really been a huge success. So we believe, and I'm chairman of the Babraham campus, so perhaps I would say this, but I think it can be demonstrated that it's probably the best place in Europe to start up and scale up a biotech style life science companies. It's a very concentrated community on one site with a world-leading research institute co-located with some 60 companies. And those 60 companies are not just scale-up companies. They are, it is as vital to create a startup community with the scale-up community for the health of the cluster, and we really try and maintain that. We've worked really hard at that, and in fact, it is the training opportunities of the scale-up companies to try and engage with startup companies and understand the issues that gets them as individuals in those companies to understand a lot more. So it's now, as I said, 60 companies, world leading in many aspects. It's raised over $1.5 billion. I'll stick to dollars now if that's okay. With $5 billion of market cap on that site. But in a sense, it's not the numbers; it's the coherence and the speed. And we were very pleased last year to publish an impact analysis that was done by Cambridge University economists. So it is in dry, formal, governmental, economic rigor. But it demonstrated that the companies on that site scale faster, that the companies in that community discover and develop faster, that they raise funds faster. And pace of fundraising is probably as important, in fact, more important than amounts of fundraising. So many of the analysis talk about how much people raise at Series A or B or C. Actually, look at the pace of capital across those as the key. But demonstrably, the companies on that site raise capital faster and raise it from a very international fund base. And that, of course, has resulted from a sort of economic viewpoint in a very, very highly positive GVA to the UK economy. But these things are long-term plays, so let's see how long, those companies sustain and maintain their independence. One measure I think would be really useful, people rarely talk about, and maybe an excellent measure of the interaction intensity in a network like that is recycle. So how much sharing, actual sharing goes on, recycle of technology, recycle of talent, and actually recycle of capital. So what you find really interestingly is that many of the CEOs on the site become angel investors and mentors in the startups on the site, and that whole recycle intensity speed is one of the key things. I'll stop there and answer questions later. Thank you.
Many thanks, Andy. And I think, again, really great points there. I think the whole issue around, this is not a linear journey, and it's very much a non-linear journey. And I think many people tend to think that certainly within government that you create something in the university lab and then it's a natural flow through to the market, but it's anything but that, and very messy and difficult often. So very good point. So we're now going to move into really a bit more of a panel session. I have some questions. We've had some questions online, so if others have got questions they want to post, please do that. But welcome back all of the panelists to here. If we can, that'd be great. Good to see you all together. So I really wanted to pick up on the first question, I suppose, around Irene provided a really sort of fantastic presentation around, I suppose, what goes on within the UK and looking a bit wider than that. And so I'd really be interested to get the views from Dave, Lisa and Kim as to how they see similar types of challenges in Canada and whether those things actually play out. So I don't know, Kim, do you want to start?
There, remember to unmute. Okay, so yes, we see, certainly many of the same challenges. A couple of small points first that Irene talked about the marketing challenge being primary. And so for the companies that we work with who are larger, so these companies we're working with 3 this year who are pretty close to 30 million in revenues, and their specific talent needs are for senior talent, people who've grown companies beyond the size before, and really for sales and marketing talent at virtually every level. And I know Lisa and Communitech, they are working to help to create talent at all levels, but this is a particular barrier for companies to get past that, the market challenge, the need for leaders to scale themselves, which it clearly is not, it's not something you can do with the what do we call it, business model canvas. You need to have people to help you to work through those challenges on a personal level. At every area of the business, the idea of rebuilding your functions around scalable processes. But I wanted to just make one other point, and that was whether you call it the maturity of the market or the density of the local tech ecosystem or the critical mass, this notion of having people who can recycle themselves, also having the access to capital that is familiar with these particular problems and has the appropriate kind of risk profile. And finally, when it comes to education, the tragedy of having business, be the most, I can't turn that down. The tragedy of having business be the most common secondary. I cannot make it stop. Talk about technologically incapable. I will just try to finish by saying that the tragedy of the business aspect is that business is, I think, far behind in the academy, teaching the lessons of scale and how business intersects with technology. We need to seriously work with the academy to make sure that we are covering what our students need.
I'll go to Lisa next and Dave, and then Andy, I think you want to come in as well. So Lisa, good to get your views as well.
Thank you, David. I mean, I would say across the entire tech sector, talent, capital, and customers remain always the key issues, the key things we're working to help our companies with, because that will always forever be what they're searching for, I think. A couple things I've noted here, specifically with science scale-up challenges, we see moving, so like making that switch from building a product to building a company tends to be sometimes where they get hung up and where they struggle to move from startup to scale up. We often see science-based companies start, they've got a discovery, a new solution, some tech, and then they have to go back and find the market and the problem that is being met or served by that solution. So that can sometimes be a problem with science-based companies. There's, of course, more complicated relationship around IP and the regulatory steps that need to take place for those companies as well. Initial costs can sometimes be prohibitive, so things like lab space, materials, and expensive equipment can get in the way of moving their business forward. And then, of course, capital. So, you know, this whole idea of slower to market can be perceived as slower to scale, which sometimes then reduces the interest in the VC capital. So those are just sort of some of the unique challenges I see when it's, you know, if I'm looking at more science-based companies that are trying to scale. I'm not sure if that's particularly helpful. I mean, but again, always talent, capital, customers. That's the biggest focus. Right now, I would say with COVID, like a couple things to think of that are different is they really care about their customers and how to keep their customers alive. Like how they need customers that are buying. So when they're looking for government support now, a lot of them are saying that it's not about how to keep us alive as tech companies, it's about how to keep our customers alive so that they can continue to pay for the services that are being offered by the tech companies.
Thanks, Lisa. And the COVID certainly presents a whole range of challenges, but also opportunities, actually. And yeah, it's I suppose it's where you are in the supply chains and things like that, which is really the key thing. Dave, good to get your take on things as well.
Well, thank you. And Kim and Lisa have done a great job of the landscape in Canada. And maybe I could just add a couple of maybe interesting points that are different perhaps than the UK. And if we talk about access to markets, internationally, we think of the US first. We tend to, and maybe we just stop there. And I think the big challenge we have now in Canada for our scale-ups is to be born with a global mindset before they get locked into a north-south interaction. So I think that's a challenge that we have. In terms of leadership, scale-ups need to be born correctly. They have to have the aspiration of being a scale-up and not just a startup, because you have to put structures in place to support when you get to the scale-up stage. And the experience that Kim is talking about bringing into play is equally valuable in the peer groups for earlier stage companies, so they are structured properly. And I think finally, I just talk about exits. Exits are great, but our observation is we exit too early in Canada and for not enough money. And I don't know if you know Sir Terry Matthews. However, I've met with him many, many times. And one of the things that he rants about, as if you know Terry, he rants, is I can't believe a company was sold to the Americans and it's accretive to their bottom line right out of the gate. We are selling too low. And so all of this structure is kind of the background to the many points that Irene was making earlier in her observations in the UK. And I'll hand it back to you, David.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. And Andy, you wanted to make a point.
Yeah. I wanted to make a comment on following up from what Lisa said, but actually I'm going to follow up as well on what David said on exits. So Lisa, I think your point there on talent was a very, very key one. Scale-ups have a different talent need than startups, and it's really important. And certainly even in sort of biotech and life sciences, where it sort of looks like the whole thing is very science orientated and probably never has any customers until much later on, and has these long developmental life cycles. Actually, you can correlate speed and success of scale up by having C-suite and leadership teams that actually have commercial experience and leadership embedded. And I think we've sort of embodied too much in the UK that in much of our sort of life science strategy and things, that sort of slight linear model, and the skills and talent side has all been about science based, and actually for scale ups it also needs to be about that commercial leadership. So I entirely agree with that, and I know it's a thing in tech, but it's actually just as big a thing in life sciences and health tech. And finally, with David's point on exits, and we suffer in the UK in exactly the same way of selling out too early. But actually, if you look at it, companies go up value chains, and they reach points where they need to make the next jump. And those discontinuity points are really important. It's often incredibly rational from the management and the investor base if they can't go through those without risk. They need to raise money, they need to build team, they need to do the next thing. If the risk levels are too high and the opportunity to sell at that point is there, you often will. So we focused at Babraham very much, and understand the Babraham campus, on understanding what those discontinuity points. Interestingly, one of those is about expansion of facilities and signing leases and odd things like that. But very much is often about investor syndicates as well. So we focused really heavily on trying to understand those discontinuity points and getting CEOs, partly through peer-to-peer networks and through those, without getting that let's sell out at that point. But it's a real issue.
Okay, great, Andy. And Lisa, I know you wanted to make a comment on exits as well.
Yeah, I mean, Andy nailed it there. I think, this is when I put that sort of like, this is my opinion, not necessarily that of my organization's comment at the top of what I'm about to say, but having spoken with founders who are at that stage of they've sold, here's what I'm told. They're like, I know that the government and the country wants us to stay in, but I'm done and I need to get out. out because I need to get back to my life. I'm exhausted and I need to think about what's best for me and my family. And so I get torn on this because I see their point. And so what I think we might need to do is try and find ways to better support our founders and CEOs through that journey so they feel they have the tools to equip themselves to be able to stay in that role and continue to find the supports for their business to continue. Because it truly comes down to the mental health and wellness of the founder and the CEO, their ability to continue financially and to support their family. Like, they get to this point where their spouse and their family is just saying, I need you back. And we need some money in our account because you've put all of your love, time, and effort into this, and I need you back. And so we have to find some other ways to support them. So that's just, I feel for them when they're in those moments. I often see that although it would be best for our country and our economy for them to stick it out, I understand that it is best for them. And my only hope is that they will then turn around and invest some of the money that they get from their sale back into other startups and scale-ups and do that recycle that Andy was talking about earlier.
Great, thanks, Lisa. And I'll come to Adam and then come to Max.
You would, I have to say, Lisa, triggered. You just described my life exactly in March 2017. So I remember that month so well. Anyway, but what I was going to say was I agree with my fellow panelists. But again, this is where the peer-to-peer is so important, because it's connecting these people who have almost certainly not been through it before with other people that have. And it's about saying, it's okay, I know you feel like that, but actually this is what it might be like. Let me tell you what happened when I went through it, this person I knew. It's all about, we learn from each other. We learn from each other's successes or also each other's spilt blood when things have gone wrong. That's the power of these peer-to-peer networks, of the non-execs, of the advisors, of these conversations. That's why people make decisions. And sometimes people solve because they think it's the only thing they can do. This is about opening people's minds up about there are alternatives and different things to go through, and also to support them when, and life in these scale-ups is not easy. It may look amazing from the outside, but it's not easy. And it's about helping and supporting them through it.
Yeah, thanks, Adam. And Max, you wanted to come in. You're on mute. You're on mute, Max.
Okay, there you go. These, Kim, we are tech twins, I think. So I'm just picking up on those other points. Are we nurturing enough early enough? So we are very keen to drive finance and funding routes into these companies. And Irene made the really good point about equity. But so often, some of our founders are like lambs to slaughter, and they're engaging with the wrong mix, the wrong type of funder. At that point, Adam, possibly they don't have the benefit of a peer network. But we, as public sector providers of that type of support, possibly have a due diligence to do more earlier in that respect, so that they have an understanding of what they're getting themselves into and can make more informed decisions. They too often these are sort of desperation decisions, and then they get into that loop where their choices are so much more narrow than they should be. And I also wanted to pick up on, Andy, your point about, which I made early on as well, regarding turning our scientists into business leaders. But David and I were in a meeting the other day with one of our Swedish colleagues, and he talked about this program, which I was intrigued about keeping scientists in the labs. So are we too keen? Scientists are amazing scientists. Are we too keen to try and make them into CEOs when what we should be doing is introducing them, connecting them to entrepreneurs who are ready to go again, who have been there and done it? So that next stage, hungry entrepreneur. Just a thought. I really love this idea, actually. Okay.
Andy certainly has.
Yeah, so I think, Maxine, I think you've raised something important there. I don't for a minute think that all scientists actually should stay in the lab. I do think
It's controversial.
yeah, well, I do think that there is this there's this sort of halo around being a CEO. I tell founders that a CEO, and Adam really articulated it earlier, a CEO is a shit role. Sorry to say that.
I agree.
It's really, really tough, right? And most people feel they're on this glamorous journey to be a CEO. Actually, most founders, and in fact CEOs, should build resilient teams of people around them with complementary skills and the ability, and that's that loneliness of the CEO is absolutely one of the challenges of scale-ups. And you need it with peer-to-peer network, but you actually need it with your colleagues around the C-suite. Actually, it doesn't matter what the damn titles are. You know a leadership team when you meet it, and a team has breadth and supports itself.
Some of our most successful companies are the ones that hire they move as a founder away from CEO and hire into the role. And you know, this whole idea of research into building businesses, I really do believe one of the things we could do better as a country is to figure out how to get our researchers to think of commercializing their work as being the gold star of success versus publishing. And there's this real mind shift we need to take where it's just like, I've achieved success as a researcher when I publish, to I've achieved success if I've commercialized my research. And they don't have to be the CEO. They can find a CEO. They can find someone to partner with to commercialize. That's, I think, the biggest gap I'm seeing right now.
Great, thanks. And for those online, just so we started a bit late, so we're probably going for about another 10 minutes and then draw it to a close. So I wanted to pick up some questions from the audience, actually. So a few questions on there. So one of the questions is, as small businesses grow, how can they best protect the welfare of their employees and ensure that their supply chains are sustainable and non-exploitative? So really good to get some views from people on that question. Who wants to start on that one?
We all did at once.
Adam first and then Dave.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say is that in a scale-up, every single person makes a difference, and every single person makes the organization better, and it's the duty of that individual, but also the duty of the CEO and the leadership team to get something from that person. And I think that's one of the things that differentiates great scale-ups. They really are building for team success and having everybody involved. I personally like scale-ups that give equity all the way down the organization, even to the most junior person. I don't think it's something that should be restricted just to the leadership team. And I think that's symptomatic of an organization that really wants to get everybody involved. However, these are incredibly hard places to work, and there can be no passengers on a successful scale-up. So if people can't be productive or successful, then that's just not something that is going to work. And as one scale-up CEO said to me, always said to me the other day, he said, "Well, Adam, I'm trying to change the people, but if I can't change the people, then I'll change the people."
Yeah,
Dave, over to you.
Thanks. I was going to, and Adam makes really good points, and I agree with the direction he's taking it. And on the supply chain elements, I think that the rush to globalization that narrative needs to be considered by scale-ups and startups, where they're taking access of funds. So Maxine was commenting on that, and they're not all equal. Who is going to produce your products, where you're going to store your information, your data. All of those things need to be considered. And in your headlong quest to save money, it's sometimes necessary to take a step back as a leadership team and consider the long haul and the rules and obligations that are going to be put upon you as you scale your company. So if the data has to sit in the UK because of a rule, don't put your data in China. It just wouldn't work out very well. And manufacturing supply chains are also equally disruptable at this point, not because of COVID, but in spite of COVID.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. And moving to, I think, a really important question is, what is the role of science-based scale-ups in challenging and destroying societal biases and discrimination, and how can this endeavour be supported? So, good to get views on that. I don't know, Lisa, whether you want to comment on that.
It looks like Andy's ready to go. Go ahead, okay. Andy.
Yeah. So I think the diversity thing is really, really important, and I think people miss actually much of what the diversity thing is sort of about. And you know, I look back to a time of 1995, 1996, where if you looked at the largest companies in the world, I think you looked at the top 10 of Fortune 500, there would have been 4 pharmaceutical companies in that list, and now there may be 1, and there were no tech companies. And actually, if you look at the chain, both very innovative sectors, if you look at those, actually the big challenge, I think, has been diversity of business model, and for a whole set of reasons. Biotech and the pharmaceutical industry is locked in very regulated but very common homogeneous business models, and that's a huge weakness. I'm a Darwinian, selection, pressure, and diversity. And diversity of business model is absolutely the thing the tech world has succeeded with. And diversity of business model only comes from diversity of thinking, and diversity of thinking comes from diversity of people. And so they are absolutely inextricably linked, and that's the philosophical point. Now, what you do about it, that's a different challenge, but diversity does link with success in the Darwinian world.
I know at Communitech we've been spending a lot of time talking about diversity. I mean, we've been focused on female founder, increasing female founders for a number of years, and now we know that's the easy place to play, and now we need to focus on broadening that. I mean, if you look at this panel, they've done a great job pulling it together to make sure we've got some strong women representation. I love it, but it's not diverse in a whole lot of other ways. So we need to think about that. Minister Baines recently put out an ask for organizations to commit to a 50-30 on our diversity. That's 50% women, 30% identifying as other minority or underrepresented groups. And I think that that's something we should all be considering. And, you know, that's right into the coaches that we have. It's our board members, it's our leadership teams, because, you know, we really are seeing this, you know, call for extra support. It is important. We need to make it a priority.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, you make a good point there. I think we've done well today in terms of gender diversity, but you know, we haven't gone back beyond that. And I think that's probably a thing which a lot of organisations actually struggle with. I know Innovate UK as an organisation, we focus, you know, very much on gender diversity, but then actually going beyond that is, you know, the next step in some ways. Irene, you wanted to make a comment, then I think Max and.
I just wanted to repeat something I said earlier about you have to be working at the very local community area and working with the networks that are really working with women, but also with Black and ethnic minority individuals. And that's what we're doing a lot of here in the UK. And it has to be at that local community level. So I think that aspect on locality is really key. The other thing we found is that on the investment side, there tends to be not as much necessary investment going into our women-founded businesses. So we've had quite a good success in having the Women Investor Code that's been established to actually make sure that the gender dynamics in investors are also changing and more broadened overall, both in gender and ethnicity. And I think that's a really important aspect you'll start to see coming to the fore even more. I'll stop there. I'm sure Max wants to talk about the Women Innovation Network, which is, I think, a good initiative in Innovate UK.
No, I wasn't, but actually a great shout out, Irene. Thank you very much. And it is a fantastic initiative, along with our Ideas Mean Business, which is about young innovators. That is a program that we run alongside the Prince's Trust. So we're drawing young innovators with fantastic ideas from disadvantaged communities across the UK. So we're really proud of that. The point I wanted to just put to the panel actually was it was picking up on Adam's point earlier on about skills. That if we are to really tackle diversity in its broadest sense and win from the potential it offers us, there's something there about how we support our founders and leaders in their early thinking, and how we support them with their recruitment, with how they build those teams. And should we be looking at, especially in tech businesses, there's an awful danger that the people like us, loads of techie people all together, where you're losing that sort of social skills, social interaction, the agility of thinking beyond their sphere of operation, actually really dulls down one's values, one's sort of social approaches, because you're not being challenged enough. So is there something there? This is the Canadian Science Policy Conference. You know, from a policy perspective, is there something we can do to nudge those types of behaviours and bring our social scientists to the fore in that respect?
And what I'm going to say on that one is actually that's probably a fantastic debate for next year and Science Policy Conference 2021, given we're running out of time. Because I think it is a really important debate, and I think the whole area around diversity and inclusion actually is really something worth focusing more on, much more in the future. So I am going to wrap up. I'm conscious of time. We started a bit late and we've overrun. I think we've heard some really great things today. Thank you, Irene, for the presentation. It's always fantastic to understand what's going on with that. I think one of the things which came out for me is it is much more than the money. Actually, it's about all of the support and guidance that companies can get from the likes of IRAP or the Sport Innovate UK or Communitech or Lazaridis provide, as well as others. It's all of that ecosystem and support which is really vital. I think, you know, the more we can provide that type of support really is important for companies to help them to grow and scale. We've got an exclusive scoop from Lisa around the Communitech and Outpost, so that was an added bonus in terms of the session. But I'd really like to finish by just saying a huge thanks to the excellent panel for all your time and input. It's really been great to hear today all about the different organisations. I'd like to thank the Canadian Science Policy Conference for hosting the session, and also Peter Searles and Anna in the technical team. Thank you very much for all the support that you've provided. Also to UK Research and Innovation colleagues for making it possible. And finally, really, I'd like to thank all those watching today and engaging. So thank you very much for all of your questions. Apologies to the person who posted a question on IP training, which we didn't quite get around to, but we'll obviously hopefully answer that again in future. And finally, to say, once you finish this session, there is a survey, so please complete the survey. Good to know what you think about the session and what you've all learnt. And just to say, finally, have a good day, whether you're starting your day in Canada or getting towards the end of it in the UK. It's been great to be involved today, and thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye.